welcome back to Breaking Ground on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon. You can contact us on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. This week, I'm chatting to Pat Boyle, Head of Group Property Strategy and Development at ESB. Pat, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Carol, for having us this morning.
Pat, ESB must be obviously one of the most synonymous brands with Ireland, but Head of Group Property Strategy and Development, what does that involve?
Well, I look after all our commercial properties and what we're going to be doing with them into the future. And I suppose for us, the number one over the next 5, 10, 15 years is with regard to sustainability, energy savings, and just creating a new working environment for people. So it's really forward thinking, forward looking with regard to sustainability, but also the work environment for people. You can't disconnect the two, I'd say. So we actually recently just completed our new HQ, which was Fitzwilliam on Lower Fitzwilliam Street, which people may have known for years as the Stevenson Gibney building, which people used to always say about the Georgian block and what we did to the Georgian block historically. And we recently completed a 300,000 square feet development, which we've built in 2 blocks, F27 and F28. And we have occupied F27, which is a nearly zero energy building, which is an NZ building. And it's a BER rated, A rated building as well. So it's extremely sustainable building.
When you were tackling this project for such an iconic location, you know, you've mentioned there that it is, of course, in the heart of the Georgian Quarter. So there's huge expectations there in terms of preserving that while allowing kind of maybe the shape of the next generation to emerge. And that's a very difficult balance. So that balance without starting to look at the sustainability aspect. So let's talk just a little maybe first about the design considerations that went into that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very interesting development here because there's almost 3 aspects of it. There was one which was the whole sustainability aspects. There was obviously the second one, which was about the Georgian area, the core, South Georgian core, extremely important. And then the third one for us was obviously creating a really good experience for staff into the future. And I suppose if you're into alliteration, I suppose, Carl, you'd say the 3 Ps, probably planet, place, and people. Consultants love the idea of alliteration. But really, I suppose it is those aspects. And I could talk a little bit about each, which, first of all, the planet, which is really the sustainability aspects. For us, we wanted to create something which was going to be sustainable. And that doesn't mean just energy. Energy is fundamental, but it is something which is going to last for a long, long time. And that was why we decided we used bricks. We used the materials which were sort of common in Georgian area, Dublin, like the iron railings, and we used walkways through the building. We had light rails. We wanted something which was going to last for hundreds of years, not just something which knocked down in 6, 10, 15, 20 years time and refurbished type stuff. This was a sustainability building. Energy obviously critical. And that's why we actually decided to look at the design first. Some buildings, what they do is they build a glass box, which during the winter time gets really cold, so you have to heat it up. And during the summertime gets really hot, so you actually have to cool it down. So actually, when you're talking about sustainability, the fundamental first thing is the design to reduce energy and you reduce technology. It should be as passive as possible. So for us, if you look at the front of our building, there's a lot of brick, there's a lot of solid. It's not a glass fronted building. It's about 60-40 ratio, which is the old Georgian building. And what that means is you actually use a lot of the thermal mass of the brick and the concrete to actually help with the building with regard to the cooling and warming of the building itself. They also, what we have on south facing areas, we have vertical fins, which is actually reduces sort of solar gain. And then on the northern side, we've actually larger windows to help with bringing light through the building as well. So those aspects of the design are really important. Then you bring in the layers on top of that. So we actually have an underground aquifer. We're very lucky to have an underground aquifer. Although underground aquifers are interesting, the civil engineers don't particularly like any idea of any water under buildings type stuff, whereas sustainability engineers love the idea that you can get some water from under buildings. So it depends what engineering profession you have. But for us, it means we can actually bring water up from the aquifer and help with the irrigation of plants and just for general grey water. We also obviously have water retention in the roof where we actually have suds. We actually use that as well. And a green roof is one to expect too. With regard to sort of the roof, we've also got a number of beehives, 2 beehives. For us, being in the central area of Dublin beside Merrion Square, it was very important to have something which was in tune with the local environment. And therefore the beehives bees actually help pollinate the flowers around the place. I believe that honey from the bees in urban areas is actually tastier than from country bees, because there's a greater diversification of flowers and plants and everything else. And I did actually taste the honey there recently, and it's amazing. Compared to the stuff you would buy in the supermarket out of a jar, actually the taste honey from a hive is just phenomenal. So the bees are actually doing their work as well for us, thankfully, type stuff, and we're actually doing stuff back for them. So it is very much an ecosystem for all of us. So then there's other things as well. We've got solar panels on the roof. We've got a couple hundred meters of square panels of solar panels, and we've got a ground source heat pump. We've got air source heat pumps. So look, I almost just sort of dismiss those type of things, which people talk about nowadays, but I almost think they're the core, they're basic now. I mean, the technology nowadays with ground source, air source heat pumps, we should just be saying that's normal. And somebody turned around to me and says, oh, so you're trying to have no impact on the environment now? And I said, no, on the contrary, we're trying to have an impact on the environment. It's a positive impact on the environment. So people, we should move away from this idea of doing zero to doing plus. And when I talk about sustainability, and stop me if I talk too much, because I'm from the north, and we actually talk forever type stuff.
Actually, Pat, this is fascinating, because the sustainability conversation, I think, up until quite recently, has been vague and it's been aspirational. And I understand that, because it's while the industry, while the construction side, while the developers, while the funders all understand what this means, and it's amazing. Only at a very recent event, I heard somebody describe carbon offsetting is now considered as antisocial as smoking in a doorway. It is not acceptable. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about not just net zero, but actually having a positive impact. So please continue, because this is exactly what we need to understand from these projects.
And the other thing we'd say too, Carol, is sustainability isn't a 9-to-5 office type stuff. So we can't sort of say, oh, we're going to have a 9-to-5 office environment, which is very sustainable. It has to be, people have to have it ingrained within themselves. It has to be in the culture of everyone. So even though we say no single-use plastics in the building, what we did was, when we inducted everyone in this building, we give them a LEAP card and said, look, we put a couple of euros on it, not much, but just enough to say, here, think sustainable travel. You should think sustainability in your own life. So for us, sustainability wasn't a 9-to-5. It was end to end for people, how they get here, how they enjoy it, how they work, and also sustainability in the local environment as well. So we put a walkway through this building, so that the local school children could come and go to their school as well. What we also did was, we've actually pedestrianised or semi-pedestrianised an area at the back of the building, which is East James Street, to create sort of like a public type plaza. And we're putting a small retail unit there, a little cafe for people outside of the building to use as well.
I'm delighted to hear that, actually, because I had the opportunity last year to walk in through the outside of the building and to experience some of the public area. And what I found really surprising is that I was expecting, because the building is quite imposing as it's designed to be on the street, when you walk in through it, it's actually very open. So when you walk in through it, it doesn't look like how you expect it to be from the street, which is a lovely surprise in this Georgian quarter. And
I'd have to sort of commend our architects, Grafton and Mahoney Pike, on that, because one of the things they wanted to do was to reflect the Georgian type thing. And Georgian, there was all these type of ideas, secret gardens. So you're right. So you'll just see the brick facade as you walk up the street, but when you walk into the walkway, you look down, you'll see a courtyard with greenery and drought-resistant plants and trees and everything else. So you do get that secret garden feeling as you walk through. You go, oh, there's greenery here too, and biophilic design for us. We also created 11 apartments as well, Carol, on the Mount Street, which we converted into apartments, and we sold them individually. There was no big investment fund and no big things. Because we wanted families come in, so they're family-sized apartments, duplex and triplex. One of the things that people used to always say just was that come 5 o'clock or 5:30 or 6 in Marion Square, all the lights went out and the city emptied. And again, to bring people back into the city, bring life back into the city, it was residential areas. So we contributed to that by having 11 apartments, which we've passed on to other people now as well, to bring families and bring people back to the area. This is, as I'm saying, this is all about sustainability. Sustainability, people think climate change, think about, CO2. It's more than that. It's about sustainability communities, sustainable living, it's about green routes, everything else. And sometimes people also find it hard to think of, stopping a hurricane coming to Asia, this climate type of things. But people have to think of their own microclimate as well. And that's why it's having the greenery, having fresh air locally, having local sustainable businesses, we can work layered all the way up and think local as well, type stuff. It creates a much better environment for everyone. So for us, sustainability is everything. It's not just energy.
I think I love the way you describe it as a planet, place and people, because I think that's fundamental. But it's interesting when I think about property development at ESB, I certainly don't think about residential for the for sale market. So is that something you've engaged in previously?
No, this was particular to this area because it was George and Dublin. I mean, 100 years ago, this was a residential area. I mean, there were people living on the streets, and we actually had people on all the houses. There were people at various levels on the streets. So for us, when we were talking to Dublin City, and this almost comes back to the place. I mean, we talked a little bit about planet and sustainability, and we talk a little bit now about the place. And for us, George and Dublin, I mean, we've been here for nearly 100 years at this point, Carol, since our inception. So this is our home. We see this area as our home. And therefore, for us, working with the community, working with the people is really important for us. We're not a flyby, we're not a drop-in type thing. We're part of the community. And ESB has always been part of the community, whether it's been the country, whether it's been city or anything else. No different for us being in George and Dublin. So when we talk to Dublin City, we talk to the people, we says, well, what could we do to make this a place which is going to be a place for people to come to? And the big thing that a lot of the councillors, a lot of the Dublin City officials, and all people saying was this absence of life, this idea of the city turning off at 5 o'clock and it just being a wasteland at 5 o'clock. And we said, well, we had a number of houses, which are Georgian houses on Mount Street, and people were saying, well, could we do a residential element in them? So this was a bit of a give back to the city for us as well, type stuff. So although we developed and built it and sold it on, sort of not at a net loss, it was a give back to try and bring life back. And it's lovely actually to see come up Marion Square now in the evening time, and if you see lights on again, it's nice, the idea that there's going to be people and children going into Marion Square again and life coming back, because sustainable cities are about people living and working side by side. They're not about a large block of offices and houses away down there. It's all about this sustainable living together and people living within the city. So for us to be able to contribute to that and do something, give that something back to the city was something really important for us as well. So it's not what we usually doing, but we had the opportunity here because of the location we were in.
It's an interesting one. I don't know if this is a definition, but I think it's a good benchmark that really, the hallmark of a functioning city is that the people who work and contribute to it can afford to live in it. And that's just not the situation in Ireland. So outside of the remit that ESB has, you were also a large employer. And so even kind of the feedback from internally, your people, can they afford, well, first of all, are they actually based in the office now since COVID? And can they afford to live and commute, or live within commuting distance of your office?
Well, I mean, since the pandemic was a strange event for all of us to have fortunately lived through. It was actually sad for many people, but it wasn't people think, oh, it changed the way we work. It didn't really change. It was a catalyst for change. We were already moving in a certain direction. And actually, when we designed this building, Carol, we already had anticipated this idea of moving from individuals having a fixed desk from 9 to 5 to moving to an environment which we call neighborhoods. So what that means is teams working together in the same place. We didn't want the idea of some people go for this hot desking and this types of we drop in. We, as I'm saying, we were talking about communities. We're communities even within the organization ourselves. So that's why we kept this idea of neighborhoods. So you go into your team area. Now the team area is actually doesn't have as many seats as for everybody, because teams come in at different times, and therefore that allowed us to have some diversity, but also help with regard to the efficiencies of the building as well. So what we're looking at now is people coming in a number of days a week. We're still today, this is what we call a learning year for ESB, because nobody knows how this whole working change is going to be for people. And it's really important to balance the needs of the business, the needs of the team, and the needs of the individual. So I always go for these threes. It's not terrible, Carol. There seems to be a threes type thing. It's a, yes, we can, all type of things. But it's fundamental. So it's the business, the teams, and the individual. And for us, getting that balance right will take a bit of time, because obviously people are trying to work out how it works with their life. We're trying to figure out how it works with the business and everything else. So we call this year a learning year. We didn't expect to have an answer on the 1st of January. We hope to have more of an idea of an answer from the 1st of January 2023. And that's what we're doing. We're experiencing it now. So people are coming back. The good thing is what we tried to create was an environment in the office when people came here, it was a very positive experience. I've actually almost tried to get people to stop talking of it as the office and say it's not the office, because people had the idea if we're going to an office, so I'm going to the office, which is the 9 to 5 type stuff. What we did was we created a place of spaces in this building. So we have lots of collaboration spaces. We have a restaurant, and people go, why have you got a restaurant type stuff? The restaurant actually is a major working area. It's also very important for serendipitous meetings. So people say you should plan your meetings coming in, while you're coming into the office, you should plan it. Well, actually, anyone who knows the working environment and knows how psychology of the workplace knows a lot of innovation takes place through serendipitous meetings. This idea of the accidental meeting. I didn't mean to meet you, Carol, but now that I see you, I wouldn't mind asking about this here. And the amount of work that happens in those things is huge. And by having our own little restaurant, what that means is that instead of going off to lunch with the person you'd always planned to go off with, you go down and you see 3 other people you didn't plan to meet. And you go, oh, now that I see you, I was doing that report. The amount of effectiveness and efficiency that comes out of those serendipitous meetings should never be underestimated. So we designed the building to have these clash areas where people would accidentally meet each other, and that would work. So we have collaboration spaces, we've got meeting spaces, we've got sort of project spaces, we've got eating spaces, social spaces, all these different types of spaces. And actually somebody said to me, oh, you only need to come to work to collaborate. And I was saying, well, I know a number of people who've got 4 children at home. The last thing they want to do is collaborate. They need to come in to get a bit of quiet. So sometimes, you create the environment with a mix of spaces, and it's whatever the people need, they can come in and use it. And
Okay.
I've called this, sorry, just say, I call it almost like a collegiate environment, because I always think of it as back when you were going to college, you actually went in to meet friends, you actually enjoyed going in to see people, you went in to learn, you went in to collaborate, and you had a bit of fun when you were in there. And you were happy to go in for the few days that you're actually in there. So we want to create that environment where people are happy to come in for the days they're in and get some benefit out of it as well.
I love that approach, and I love the concept of designing for that. I think your attitude towards considering this a year of learning is a really positive thing in a time when many organizations are scrambling to understand office use. The resources that will be needed, the square footage, is it more, is it less? There's a lot of scrambling happening at the moment, whereas actually to be able to sit back and experience it and really consider this to be a year of learning, I think is a really positive thing. But over the last few months, has any behavior happened that maybe surprised you? Was there anything really that you hadn't planned for?
Well, just say, I mean, the year of learning is important for us because we are a long-term company. I mean, ESB has been here 100 years. We're going to be 100 years now. So for us, taking 6 months, 9 years is really important because we are part of the fabric of the country. You have to be strategic. You have to be long-term. And you will learn, and in learning, you make sure you do the right thing in 5 or 10 years' time. This isn't a 6-month turnaround type of company. We are long-term, and we're here for the community for long. So we can actually do this, but it's really important to learn so you do it right for the long term. Have we learned anything different from what we would have expected type stuff? Well, I suppose it was for people to get over the inertia of coming in. This idea where people sort of, they've built up a level of working from home, where they're doing things here. And, it's almost the fear of having to come back again. What I'm going to do, what I'm going to do. So it's actually trying to explain to people that when we talk about anchor days, so what we have, you see what anchor days, that people be in the office anchor days. But even within the anchor days, there's flexibility. So, we're in a flexible world now. You don't go from one rigidity to another rigidity. So you don't turn around and say, okay, you used to come in 5 days a week and you were anchored to the desk, and now you're coming in, you'll be anchored 3 days to the desk, because the idea of this idea of rigidity has to change. But people still have it in their head. Oh my God, I'm going from having a flexible working environment to going to a rigid working environment, and it's getting over that fear. And it takes a while for people to come in to realize, actually, this is very positive. I'm enjoying this. But there is an initial inertia, initial fear for people, and it's working with that. It's not sort of saying, "Oh, get over it, you're in tomorrow morning." It's actually explaining to people why you're coming in, what the environment is different, and how we will treat them with the difference. And we've developed things like we call team charters, where the teams talk to each other and say, "Look, explain to people how we're going to work and how we're going to do this in the future." And it is a collaborative basis with people too as well, because people have been maybe working from home for 2 years. That's their new environment, and then to change that can be very traumatic for people, Carol. So look, it is something we're learning, it's something we're developing, but by creating this positive environment, when people come in, they get the buzz again, and that's what's really important.
Yeah, I think that a room for not just not just for the organization or the business or the teams, but right down to an individual level, actually having the space to really figure out what works across all these different levels is very important. And Pat, before we finish up today, we've been talking about obviously Project Fitzwilliam, which was such an iconic one and such a huge one. And, I think it's really strong when you put it in the terms of ESB being around for the last century and needing something that's going to serve for the next century and beyond. But just for me to understand and for our audience to understand, what's the scale of, you're the head of Group Property Strategy and Development. What's the scale of property and assets under your remit?
We have a number of large office blocks around the country still. For quite a few years, we had a disposal program because a lot of our old buildings were old, and we actually, like most companies, we consolidated into in single buildings, and we have a number of leased buildings around the city as well. So we still have quite a reasonable portfolio in Cork and Limerick, in Sligo, and obviously still quite a few buildings around Dublin as well, which we're looking at into the future. For us, we'll be looking at all our portfolio buildings, because Fitzwilliam 27, which was an NZ building, BER A-rated building, ESB has a goal of net zero by 2040. So we'll be looking at all our buildings, and we're using the Fitzwilliam 27 as a template for the future ones, and saying no fossil fuels is what we'll be going. There's no fossil fuels at all in F27, it's all electric. And as we move towards decarbonising the grid, then effectively you'll be using renewable energy for the whole building type stuff. So nearly zero becomes zero at that point. So we're looking at the full portfolio of buildings around the country. And over a period of time, we'll be looking to bring them up to a much higher level of sustainability as well, with regard to PER, with regard to NZ as well. It's the future we're going. This, for us, when I said about a learning year for the people, for us, it'll be a learning year for the building as well. We actually have one of our partners, BDP, who with the M&E people, they're monitoring this building for the full year with regard to what the energy usage and how we're doing. And we'll learn from that as well. We're looking at, so learning is not only from the people's point of view, it's for us learning how the building operates, what's the best aspects of the building, because this is the template that we'll be using for other buildings in the future.
In terms of strategy, just because we know that we're coming into uncertain times, certainly the news coming out of the tech sector over the past week alone has really put everybody in a little bit of a spin in terms of what kind of office space would be required. So in addition to everything else that you do, you are the landlord for other organizations leasing your offices. What kind of strategy approach are you taking? And obviously I know the ESB is a long-term company, but in terms of the next 18 to 24 months and beyond that we're likely to be facing, what kind of strategy have you put in place for the commercial buildings that you don't occupy yourself?
Well, we don't have many buildings that we lease on. Most of ours are our own buildings, but we do lease a number of large buildings. So we're more of a tenant than a landlord. So we are, Carol. And we are looking at those buildings with regard to the future. I suppose you're saying about the tech industry, but for us, it's hybrid working is probably the main driver of how we operate and how we'll need to work into the future. So there's no doubt that hybrid work will have a significant impact upon how the offices into the future. The level of that impact is something which we're going through and we're looking at now at the minute. So it's hard to gauge exactly what that is. But I would also say, because with my property hat on too, is, everything is cyclical, so therefore, people sort of every now and again go, oh my God, and this is great having a 100-year vision that we actually look at 100 years to, everything changes and everything goes up and down. So even though people might be saying, oh my God, the tech industry is going through, we've seen ups and downs, and people will see ups and gains as well. So I wouldn't say people should get too concerned or too worried in the future. There's going to be changes over the next number of months, few years. Hybrid working is probably the biggest change. We're looking at consolidation in our offices. But with the growth in the economy, it's amazing when people are talking about a recession in Europe, but Ireland's still having a growth rate. That's the type of economy that we have in this country. So if with that in mind, if the world is going through a recession, we're still growing. Whenever the world comes out of it again, we'll grow even faster. So there may be a blip, there may be things, but look, I'd be very positive about the outlook for property into the future. But in the near term, we'll be obviously looking at consolidating our offices, looking at the idea of the hybrid working, and making sure, because this isn't about just savings and things. It's about ensuring that you have enough of a density of people to make buildings energy. So if you had a large office block and a large office with only 5 or 6 people sitting in the office floor, there's no energy, there's nothing in that for the people at all. But if you create density where you have 20 or 30 people all working together, that creates an energy amongst people. So this is about bringing people together, not just about can you save costs. It's about ensuring you have the dynamism of the staff and the people come and go, and making a happy environment for people to come into. It has to work in all ways, type stuff. So that's why sometimes it's important to consolidate. It's as much important to create a better environment for people than it is to say, oh, I'm saving 100 square feet type stuff or 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, and look, that absolutely makes sense. And before we finish up today, just maybe for portfolio owners or managers who are listening in here today and they understand the importance of sustainability, but they are not far along on their journey, is there maybe something you can share in terms of some of the early learnings that might be of benefit to them?
Well, I would say that, if you're talking about consolidation, you're talking about fewer offices, there's no doubt that the most sustainable offices are going to be the ones that people are going first. I mean, as I'm saying, we're using F27 as the template. All major companies will be saying sustainability is number one. So if people are only on the journey or thinking about it, I would say is that if you are looking at your property being a commercial property in the future, it'll have to be very sustainable, because that's what that's the core principles of our company. And you be sure that'll be the core principles of a lot of national and multinational companies in the future. So sustainability is number one, I'd say, in the future.
Okay, and you do recommend beehives on site?
Oh, this is something small, right? People are saying, oh my God, there's 100,000 bees in your roof. Oh my God. We've obviously a lot of greenery, a lot of planting in our roof, and we had Bernard Seymour did our planting. So it's a lot of wild planting, and we have a little tea area people can sit out on, and there's bees all around them, and people don't even notice the bees. Like, bees don't bother people. They're very happy. They're great partners, great neighbors to have in anybody's house type stuff and anybody's building. So I thoroughly recommend them as a neighbor.
Do you know, I've learned a lot from you here today. And one of those things is that I have never heard before, that the honey from bees, from urban bees, is different. Not to talk about superior to that.
I have to be careful, Carol, or else I'll get bee growers from all around the country giving out to me type stuff. This is all personal preferences, by the way, Carol. Well, all I say is the honeycomb bee that I tried from up above was delicious.
Well, I'm going to test that theory, and I will definitely be reporting back. So it's always good to learn something new. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Carol, it was lovely. You're very nice. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. That was Pat Boyle, Head of Group Property Strategy and Development at ESB. And that's it from us this week. You can get in touch with the show on social media at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. My thanks to the Hear Me Roar production team and to Luke Delaney on sound for Dublin South FM. Until next time, thank you for listening.